Droughts have plagued the Midwest from its first settlement, but the drought in southwest Kansas from July to December 2012 was exceptional. The economy of southwest Kansas depended on farming, which in turn required moisture to produce crops and maintain livestock. The area also featured wetlands, prairies, and rivers that depended on rain to support their wildlife. In comparison with other droughts that took place in Kansas, the 2012 drought ranked as one of the worst. The most widespread drought was during the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, when southwest Kansas was among the areas with worst conditions. Crop yields were extremely low, and some farms simply abandoned. Drought reoccurred throughout the next decades, except for the 1990s. The drought of 2012 was narrower in scope than that of the 1930s, but it extended into Texas and Oklahoma. In Texas and Oklahoma, dry conditions were very common, especially in the western areas of the state. Texas, in particular, felt the impact of the drought. 2011 was the driest year on record, and it showed no signs of change the following year. While Kansas farmers worry primarily about crop production and only secondarily about the cattle industry, Texas' main agricultural business was beef production. In Oklahoma, the drought in the summer of 2012 followed a wetter spring than usual. The rain greatly benefited the Oklahoma wheat crop and produced pasture grass for cattle herds. In July, native wetlands dried up, and cracked earth appeared throughout the Big Salt Marsh of the Quivira National Wildlife Refuge in Stafford County. By the end of the month, both Big Salt Marsh and Little Salt Marsh had dried up. A short period of rain followed at the end of August, but the marshes were again dry in October, and creek levels were very low and sporadic, sometimes drying for a few days, then flowing again. This pattern of alternating creek levels continued throughout the year. Cheyenne Bottoms in central Kansas, the largest interior marsh in the United States and a stopping point for millions of migrating birds, faced dry conditions. By July, virtually all of the water in the marsh had evaporated. Year-round moisture is necessary for crop growing in Kansas, summer rainfall for crops like corn and milo, and fall, winter, and spring moisture for wheat. Row crops were significantly harmed by the lack of moisture. In July 2012, rainfall in Garden City was only 2.06 inches, nearly 3/4 of an inch below normal. By December, moisture was 6.1 inches below the average. Hay production also decreased during the summer months. For buyers, scarcity meant higher prices, but growers struggled to harvest the amounts necessary to return a good profit. Irrigation on some hay circles was shut off because of water restrictions. Some hay farmers abandoned hay altogether and planted row crops that required less water. Southwest Kansas is known for its high winds, which can blow large amounts of soil from farmland. In years of normal rainfall, prairie grass and other plants provide ground cover, shielding the valuable topsoil from blowing off the fields. The loss of topsoil, along with the absence of precipitation and intense heat, degraded pastureland and fields. Water use was significantly restricted throughout the growing season of 2012. In southwest Kansas, agricultural irrigation comes primarily from the Ogallala Aquifer that lies underground. While the aquifer is not fed by rainfall in the high plains, its water levels ultimately depend on moisture received by precipitation. Farmers' increasing use of the aquifer's supply throughout 2012 led to a decrease in the amount of available water. Furthermore, because of increased water use for irrigation, longer hours were needed to service center pivots and flood irrigation pipes in addition to the water cost itself. The drought increased the cost of labor as well as the gasoline or electricity used to power water pumps, which were in almost constant use. Some irrigation systems were not shut off until an inch of rain fell at once during the summer. In July, Kansas Governor Sam Brandbach and several state officials toured the state to evaluate the impact of the drought. By that time, every county had declared some level of drought. On July 23rd, the governor signed Executive Order 12-09, creating a drought response team to review and respond to the crisis. He also issued a drought emergency, allowing Kansans to use state lakes and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers reservoir waters for domestic, municipal, and livestock uses. Brownback asked water users across Kansas for well measurements and a review of conservation plans in an attempt to anticipate worsening drought conditions. Most cities in drier areas of the state had already enacted conservation measures, and Brownback encouraged Kansans to use water responsibly and prevent worse shortages. Assessing the drought damage is complicated. Drought is unlike any other natural disaster because there are no warning signs of its arrival, no accurate way to measure its impact, and, for the most part, no way to counter it through manual labor. It is purely natural, and it can only have a natural remedy. Many farmers hoped the drought of 2012 was the worst they would see, and while comparisons to the Dust Bowl of the 1930s are unfair, it was easily one of the worst droughts they ever experienced. Additionally, the location of the drought was crucial in calculating its effect. Since the driest area in the country was located in the Midwest, farms and businesses in the regions experienced hardships first. As the drought continued, states across the country encountered increased grocery and produce prices. By the end of 2012, Kansas had experienced high snowfall amounts, beneficial for farmers who had drilled winter wheat in September. Nevertheless, the above-average moisture was not enough to reverse the effects of the dry spell in the summer. As of December 2012, 100% of the state suffered at least severe drought conditions. 96% of Nebraska was in at least extreme drought, over 90% of Oklahoma, and 65% of Texas. These Midwestern states were economically dependent on each other and vital to the agricultural production of the country. Kansas, as the country's top wheat producer, was among the most essential of farming states. Though the drought showed few signs of letting up during 2012, Kansans continued to implement water conservation techniques and find new ways to profit during the drought. Their actions served as a model for the rest of the country as it dealt with similar situations.